Hey, what's up? It's Cute What If. This side. Today we will be seeing what if Deku was the successor. Before we move ahead with the FIC, leave a like and subscribe to the channel for future what ifs like this. Toshinori Yagi, known as Allmight, entered the room where All for One awaited him. AFO greeted him with a smirk, using his real name, which was unusual for their encounters. Allmight, closing the door behind him, felt a wave of unease wash over him. AFO was calm, but there was an underlying excitement that made Allmight wary. He questioned AFO's intentions for summoning him. AFO leaned forward, curious about Allmight's knowledge of Izuku Midoriya, his successor. Allmight sighed, determined not to let AFO get into his head. He asserted that Midoriya would become his successor, regardless of AFO's opinions. AFO interrupted, implying a deeper connection to Midoriya, which irritated Allmight. He had already suffered the consequences of AFO's manipulations and refused to let it happen again. AFO taunted Allmight about blood tests, attempting to provoke him further. Frustrated, Allmight stood up, ready to leave. He declared the conversation over, unwilling to engage in AFO's games. AFO, however, suggested that Allmight could verify his claims through his investigator friends, hinting at a connection to Midoriya that left Allmight feeling uneasy. As Allmight slammed the door behind him, disbelief and confusion flooded his mind. The notion that Midoriya could be AFO's son was too much to comprehend. He wrestled with the implications of AFO's words, questioning Midoriya's true intentions. The thought that Midoriya, with the power of one for all, could pose a threat weighed heavily on him. Doubts spiraled in his mind, igniting a sense of anxiety about the young hero's potential. AFO had successfully tugged at Allmight's strings with just a few words. Determined to uncover the truth, Allmight reached into his pocket for his phone, knowing he needed answers. The next day, Izuku walked alone on the path to the UA building, wondering where everyone was and if he was late. Aizawa emerged from the building, his gaze scrutinizing Izuku for any signs of danger. Izuku greeted him, sensing something was off as Aizawa seemed to be avoiding eye contact. He asked about the absence of others, noting that no one was at the dorms or walking to UA. Aizawa instructed him to stop running and stay where he was. Izuku complied, calling out to Aizawa, but moments later, Allmight appeared, whispering to Aizawa before turning to Izuku with a nervous smile. He reassured Izuku that everything was fine and told him he could come inside. However, Izuku noticed Allmight's trembling hands, realizing that something was indeed wrong. As Izuku rushed up the stairs to confront Allmight, the hero unexpectedly pushed him back, causing Izuku to fall and twist his wrist as he braced himself. Confusion and fear filled Izuku's mind as he questioned why Allmight had acted that way. Allmight, realizing his mistake, apologized, but avoided looking Izuku in the eyes. Aizawa observed Izuku's distress and extended a hand to help him up, urging him to follow. Izuku expressed his confusion about being in the principal's office and the presence of all the teachers. Aizawa explained that they would provide clarity once Allmight returned. Izuku anxiously took a seat in the center of the room, where a single chair awaited him. When Allmight finally arrived, Aizawa expressed his annoyance, and Allmight awkwardly laughed as he noticed Izuku's distressed state. Aizawa then asked Izuku if he had any intentions of harming others. Izuku was taken aback, standing in disbelief at the question. He insisted that he wanted to become a hero, seeking Allmight's support. Allmight hesitated, revealing that Izuku's father was connected to a dangerous figure. Izuku's concern for his father's well-being escalated as he begged for answers. Allmight confirmed the shocking truth about Izuku's lineage, stating that he shared blood with a notorious villain. Izuku was devastated, fearing that everyone would see him as a threat. The atmosphere in the room grew tense as the teachers regarded him with suspicion. Izuku felt cornered, knowing that any defense he offered could further incriminate him. As Izuku's panic intensified, he realized that Allmight, who had once been his greatest ally, now viewed him through a lens of doubt. Tears streamed down his face as he cried out, questioning whether Allmight would reject him after everything they had been through. Suddenly, a portal appeared behind him, and a sinister figure grabbed his shoulder, pulling him into darkness. All Might and Aizawa shouted his name in alarm as Izuku struggled against the grip, expressing his anger and hurt. In an instant, he vanished, leaving All Might in shock, grappling with the consequences of his actions. He fell to his knees, overwhelmed by regret, realizing that he had failed Izuku when he needed him the most. Izuku awoke to the sound of an argument, disoriented and unsure of his surroundings. He lay flat on the ground, surrounded by darkness, with only a faint light seeping through the crack of two closed doors. An unknown voice emerged from the other side, expressing frustration. The speaker mentioned wanting to eliminate a certain kid but acknowledged that their master had a plan. Another voice responded, expressing skepticism about the kid's loyalty. Izuku, feeling a surge of curiosity, quietly approached the doors, trying to remain unnoticed. He leaned in closer to the gap, hoping to catch a glimpse of what was happening. Suddenly, a cheerful girl exclaimed that he was awake, and Izuku felt a rush of panic as footsteps approached rapidly. He quickly rolled back to the spot where he had woken up, shutting his eyes to feign sleep. The doors swung open, and a high-pitched giggle interrupted the conversation. The girl teased that Izuku looked cuter when he was actually asleep. When he opened his eyes, he found himself face-to-face with Toga, Dabi, and Tamura. Toga pulled Izuku up to his knees, and he realized he was tightly restrained, with chains binding his neck and cuffs around his hands and feet. His clothes were torn, and despite the melancholy in his eyes, they still held a certain beauty. Tamura, sitting casually on a bar seat, revealed that Izuku's father was all for one and asked how he felt about that. Izuku looked down, tears welling in his eyes as he struggled to process the revelation. Tamura continued, pointing out how quickly the so-called heroes had labeled Izuku a villain. He taunted Izuku about All Might's rejection, suggesting that even the hero believed him to be a threat. Izuku trembled at the weight of Tamura's words, feeling anger rise within him. As Tamura leaned closer, he offered Izuku a proposition, revealing that he wanted Izuku to be his successor. Izuku looked up, skepticism in his gaze, questioning Tamura's intentions. Tamura assured him that he could always ask his father directly if he needed confirmation. After a moment of contemplation, Izuku reluctantly agreed to the name change, asking to be called Deku instead. Tamura praised him and explained that his father was imprisoned deep underground, waiting for Izuku to help him escape. Izuku, determined, assured Tamura that he had a plan. The following day, the students at UA were gathered by their teachers to discuss the events of the previous day. Aizawa stood in front of them, arms crossed, and began to explain the situation. He asked if anyone had noticed anything unusual about Izuku, who had not joined them during a cleanup exercise. Confusion spread among the students as they tried to recall any strange behavior from Izuku. Aizawa searched through Izuku's room for clues but found nothing suspicious except for a collection of hero analytics volumes. He declared the room off-limits, raising questions among the students. Aizawa revealed the shocking truth. Izuku's father was the villain all for one, and Izuku had been kidnapped after they disclosed his lineage. The room fell silent as the students processed the information, disbelief etched on their faces. Bakugo, unable to contain his anger, questioned Aizawa's claims. He demanded to know how Izuku could have been taken if All Might was like a father to him. Aizawa sensed an unspoken connection between All Might, Izuku, and Bakugo, and decided to leave Bakugo with his thoughts for now. Uraraka sank to her knees, tears streaming down her face as she grappled with the reality that the person she cared for might not be the hero she believed him to be. Meanwhile, All Might had gone to meet AFO once again. He sat down in front of AFO, his expression filled with disdain. All Might remarked on AFO's apparent satisfaction, suggesting that he had succeeded in harming his own son. AFO, with a grin, noted the unusual look in All Might's eyes, taunting him about the symbol of peace possibly shedding tears. All Might warned AFO to choose his words carefully, hinting at the ease with which he could end their encounter. AFO laughed, relishing in All Might's pain. He pointed out that All Might's threats were less intimidating given their history, and he speculated on how Izuku must have felt when All Might turned against him. AFO claimed that it was actually he who had kept Izuku alive, knowing that All Might would choose him as a successor and train him in the use of One for All. He expressed surprise that All Might had taken on a fatherly role, leading Izuku deeper into the world of heroes, suggesting that Izuku's admiration for All Might was misguided. AFO locked eyes with All Might, sensing the anger and frustration simmering within him. He provocatively mentioned the gun All Might had brought, questioning whether he had the resolve to use it. AFO suggested they would soon see how much emotion it would take for All Might to finally act. AFO continued, revealing that the kidnapping of Izuku was a test of the boy's admiration for All Might. He explained that Izuku had grown up without a father and had sought guidance from others, particularly Bakugo. AFO claimed that Izuku's admiration for All Might was merely a reflection of Bakugo's own admiration, implying that it was not genuine. A week later, All Might was no longer allowed to visit AFO due to his unstable emotional state. Meanwhile, Bakugo was out for a late afternoon walk, feeling frustrated by Kirishima's constant presence. He grumbled to himself about not being able to visit Inko with Kirishima trailing him, blaming Deku for the situation. Suddenly, Bakugo thought he heard Izuku's voice and called out for him. Kirishima expressed concern, suggesting that Bakugo might be imagining things. Bakugo insisted he had heard Izuku and began to jog down the path, searching for him. As they ran, they passed an alleyway marked by signs of a struggle. Bakugo felt a chill run down his spine and quietly instructed Kirishima to call Mr. Aizawa and an ambulance. Kirishima, taken aback, hesitated, but Bakugo was determined to help, resolved to do what he could to stop the bleeding. Meanwhile, All Might sat on the clean steps of Dagoba Municipal Beach Park, a place that held memories of Izuku. His thoughts were consumed by the boy, but every time he tried to picture Izuku, AFO's image overshadowed it. He felt lost, tears streaming down his face as he grappled with the realization that he was becoming something he had always feared, a villain, because of how he now viewed Izuku. His phone vibrated in his pocket, and he pulled it out slowly to see Aizawa's name. He answered, hearing Aizawa's urgent voice informing him that Izuku had been found and was in the hospital in critical condition. All Might sprang to his feet, declaring he was on his way. Aizawa cautioned him to keep his emotions in check, warning that if he couldn't control himself, he would be barred from seeing Izuku. All Might, struggling to maintain his composure, thanked Aizawa, determined to be there for Izuku. All Might walked down the hallway to Izuku's room, where Bakugo and Kirishima were waiting. They sat outside Izuku's room, looking as if they had witnessed something terrible. None of them spoke as All Might approached the door, nor did they glance at him. They were completely frozen. All Might opened the door to find Aizawa waiting at the foot of Izuku's bed. Aizawa's expression was grave as he spoke. He explained that every single bone in Izuku's body had been dislocated or broken, including his spine, ribs, arms, fingers, wrists, legs, feet, toes, knees, and kneecaps. His jaw was locked and he was missing teeth. Aizawa continued, revealing that needles had damaged Izuku's eyes, leaving one at risk of blindness. Scars around his feet, neck, and hands suggested he had been restrained. Recovery Girl couldn't assist him because he lacked the energy to respond. All Might struggled to hold back his tears as he looked at his student, who lay in a hospital bed, clinging to life. They had found Izuku abandoned in an alley, blood staining the walls and ground. Aizawa lamented that they had kept the kidnapping of another student a secret, but the news of Izuku's condition would inevitably spread. All Might asked when Izuku might regain consciousness, to which Aizawa replied that they didn't know. All Might expressed his need to apologize to Izuku, and Aizawa agreed that they all owed him an apology before leaving to send Bakugo and Kirishima home. As Bakugo opened the door to leave, he turned to All Might and stated that they needed to talk when Izuku woke up. All Might fell asleep beside Izuku, waiting for him to awaken. Izuku stirred in his sleep, a faint smile appearing on his face as he murmured about the beginning of their collapse. 12 days passed, and every night, All Might waited for Izuku to awaken. Finally, the moment arrived. Izuku woke to see his classmates leaving the room, a metallic taste in his mouth. He coughed lightly, catching Aizawa's attention as he escorted the others out. Aizawa exclaimed Izuku's name, alerting the other students to his awakening. All Might awoke to Aizawa's voice and looked up at Izuku, who appeared lifeless, his eyes shadowed with sleep. The students rushed back into the room. Izuku looked at them but couldn't move his head, whispering with a broken voice about whether they thought he was a villain. Everyone shook their heads in denial. Aizawa reassured him that the villains were responsible for his injuries, stating they would never harm an ally. Todoroki asked Izuku what had happened, but Izuku replied that he couldn't remember. All Might watched as Izuku raised his hand, which cracked and bled from his wounds. All Might took his hand and listened as Izuku apologized for being the son of AFO and for not being his successor. All Might interrupted, expressing his own regret for doubting Izuku, claiming it was his fault. Izuku, in despair, pointed out that All Might wouldn't even look him in the eye, declaring that he could no longer be his successor. All Might cried silently, realizing that Izuku had already come to terms with the situation. After everyone else left, Aizawa stayed with Izuku. Izuku asked if they could see his father, surprising Aizawa. He repeated the question, and Izuku explained that his current state showed he could not plan anything harmful. After a moment of thought, Aizawa agreed to fetch a wheelchair. Aizawa carefully lifted Izuku and placed him in the wheelchair, then they made their way to meet AFO. Upon entering the room, AFO greeted Izuku as his son. Izuku responded weakly, and the atmosphere was tense. AFO remarked on the state of Izuku's eye and inquired about what had happened. Izuku remained silent, while Aizawa stood behind him, listening intently. AFO teased Aizawa about his inability to prevent Izuku's kidnapping, prompting Aizawa to tell him to back off. AFO continued, expressing his interest in Aizawa's quirk. AFO then questioned Izuku about how long he would continue to play the role of the helpless child. Suddenly, Izuku stood up and activated his quirk, causing Aizawa to panic as Izuku vanished from sight. Izuku's voice echoed, apologizing to Aizawa but questioning whether it truly mattered, claiming he was just a villain. In a moment of anger, Izuku lashed out, causing Aizawa to cry out in pain. Aizawa, holding his eyes, struggled to stop the bleeding. Izuku expressed his confusion about his identity, torn between being a hero or a villain, but declared that his father would not reject him like the others had. Izuku approached the glass separating them and flicked his finger, shattering it. He urged AFO to take him away. AFO placed his hand on Aizawa's head, claiming his quirk for himself. Aizawa began to weaken as his powers were stripped away. AFO promised to use Aizawa's quirk well and commanded Izuku to follow him. Izuku complied, leaving Aizawa on the floor. As Izuku walked away, Aizawa grabbed his foot, insisting that just because his father was a villain did not mean he had to be one too. Aizawa looked up at Izuku, but Izuku retorted that he had been treated like a villain from the start. He kicked Aizawa in frustration, expressing his anger at the hypocrisy of those who called themselves heroes. With that, Izuku walked away, leaving Aizawa quirkless and wounded. AFO and Izuku entered the League's hideout, located far out of town. Izuku kept his gaze down, unsure of his actions. He felt more danger surrounded by heroes, harboring anger towards them. Even if he chose to return, he couldn't bear their presence. He was in a bind, but he believed his father could save him. Tamura stood up from his seat, announcing their arrival. AFO entered and greeted Tamura, inquiring about his well-being. Tamura mentioned the significant impact of AFO's fight with All Might on the world. AFO noticed Tamura's displeasure and questioned it. Tamura expressed his frustration, feeling sidelined in AFO's plans for change. AFO responded with amusement, acknowledging Tamura's realization. AFO then turned his attention to Izuku, highlighting the power of Tamura's quirk and mental abilities. Tamura stood up again, demanding to know AFO's point. AFO smirked and declared Izuku's first task as his successor, to kill Tamura. Tension filled the room as Izuku struggled to comprehend the command, while Tamura prepared to retaliate. Tamura accused AFO of using him to gain All Might's attention and expressed his anger. In a sudden move, he charged at AFO. Lightning flashed, and Izuku restrained Tamura, demonstrating his desire to protect others. AFO approached, reminding Tamura that it was Izuku's idea to free him from prison. Izuku interrupted, expressing his internal conflict and tightening his grip on Tamura's throat. AFO explained that Izuku's reactions stemmed from his hero nature, which was slowly emerging. Izuku cried out, denying that this violent behavior was who he truly was. Tamura managed to free a hand and demanded to be released. Izuku remained silent, taunting Tamura instead. Tamura attempted to use his quirk, but Izuku countered, asserting that Tamura's ability was too slow. In a swift motion, Izuku overpowered Tamura, demonstrating a dark side that surprised even him. As Tamura fell, Izuku stood over him, a mix of emotions on his face. AFO observed Izuku's reaction, noting his unexpected satisfaction in the act. Izuku, realizing the weight of his actions, fell to the ground in shock, covering his eyes with his bloodied hands. AFO offered a reward for Izuku's actions, stating that Aizawa's quirk would now belong to him. He questioned Izuku about the scars he bore, suggesting they were a reminder of the pain inflicted by heroes. Izuku's tone shifted as he acknowledged the scars, revealing his desire for recognition of the suffering he endured. AFO praised him and bestowed Aizawa's quirk upon him. All Might repeated to Aizawa, who was resting in a hospital bed, that they thought Izuku was being taken to AFO, but in reality he was brought there to have his quirk taken. Aizawa, feeling the weight of his blindness, reflected on the events that had unfolded. He acknowledged that All Might's quirk was valuable to AFO, which explained why he had been targeted first. Suddenly, a nurse entered, carrying a large, heavy bag. All Might, curious and concerned, unzipped it, only to be hit by a terrible smell. He stepped back in shock, realizing it was Tamura Shigaraki's lifeless body. Izuku, feeling a twisted sense of pride, laughed at the thought of All Might's disappointment in him for killing his mentor's grandchild. AFO praised Izuku for his destructive actions, comparing it to the way he had manipulated Izuku's mind as a child. Dabi, Toga, and the others entered the room, sent by Tamura to scout for recruits. Dabi questioned the absence of a certain handyman, to which Izuku replied with a heavy heart that he was dead. AFO quietly left the room, leaving tension in the air. Toga panicked, and Izuku, angered, warned them to calm down or they might meet the same fate. Dabi challenged Izuku, but Izuku's eyes glowed with intensity as he threatened him, declaring that he would destroy the world. An explosion suddenly rocked the building, drawing Bakugo's attention as he called out for Izuku. Rising from the rubble, Izuku expressed his resentment towards Bakugo, feeling that he had always overshadowed him. He accused Bakugo of being jealous of his kindness, which fueled their rivalry. Bakugo, worried about Izuku's state, urged him to reconsider his actions, mentioning Inko and All Might's concern. Izuku, feeling bored, declared his intention to kill Bakugo, who braced himself for the confrontation. Izuku taunted Bakugo about his father being a better teacher than All Might, and as he grabbed Bakugo's shoulder, he vanished only to reappear behind him. Bakugo, realizing the gravity of the situation, began to cry as he found himself unable to move. Izuku reveled in Bakugo's tears, relishing the power he held over him. He announced his plans to take Bakugo's quirk, along with others, and laughed at the thought of his friends suffering while he remained unconscious. Just then, All Might emerged from behind a tree, causing Izuku to falter. His grip on Bakugo loosened, and Bakugo fell to the ground, unconscious. Izuku, momentarily relieved at seeing All Might, suddenly stopped, grappling with his conflicting emotions. He realized he had been running towards All Might, the very person he felt betrayed by. Izuku's internal struggle intensified as he battled with his identity. All Might, alarmed by Izuku's transformation, rushed to him, but Izuku, filled with anger and confusion, pushed him away. He felt trapped, his hands digging into his own skin as he cried out for someone to end his pain. AFO approached, observing the turmoil within Izuku, noting that his villainous persona had taken hold but was not entirely in control. His heroic side remained locked away in the depths of his mind, all because he had been adopted and raised with the ideals of heroism. AFO gently patted Izuku's head as he struggled with his emotions. AFO remarked that Izuku was on a troubling path, having taken the lives of a few, including a young Tamura. All Might observed Izuku, who was visibly in distress. AFO continued to rub Izuku's head, questioning if All Might was satisfied with the outcome. He mentioned that he had already taken Bakugo's quirk and that Izuku would follow suit. All Might knelt beside Izuku, expressing his concern for him. He spoke softly, urging Izuku to return to them, his eyes filled with sadness. Izuku, however, felt trapped, believing that his return would lead to their demise at his hands. He clenched his eyes shut, overwhelmed by his inner turmoil. AFO sighed, indicating that All Might had lost Izuku. In a fit of anger, Izuku demanded to be freed, expressing his frustration with the presence in his mind and his desire to eliminate it as soon as possible. The force of AFO's power pushed All Might back, and AFO smiled, acknowledging Izuku's feelings before vanishing into thin air, taking Izuku with him. All Might stood up and rushed to Bakugo, who lay unconscious. He expressed his concern for young Midoriya, wondering what had happened to him. Izuku awoke in a bed, hearing Inko's voice echoing through the house, though he couldn't quite make out her words. He got up and walked into the hallway, calling out for his mother. Following the sound of her voice, he climbed the stairs, trying to decipher her mumbling. He reached a door he thought led to her, but it opened onto a rooftop, the same rooftop where he had once asked All Might if he could become a hero. Instead of All Might or Inko, he found himself standing there, staring back at him. Confused, he asked the figure who looked just like him who he was. The boy smirked and replied that he was Izuku, the real version of himself. Izuku felt bewildered as the boy lunged at him with a knife aimed at his throat, insisting that he couldn't do anything if Izuku kept interfering. Despite Izuku's efforts to hold him back, the boy shouted that he was stronger. Izuku protested, claiming they were different people, but the boy urged him to stop denying the truth. In a sudden move, the boy moved the knife down, lightly grazing Izuku's throat. Izuku awoke again, this time with a headache, sighing to himself about the recurring dream. AFO entered the room and sat beside him on the bed. Izuku expressed his desire to eliminate his other self and asked how he could do it. AFO inquired if he had the same dream again and whether he had managed to harm his other self. Izuku admitted he had only managed a light cut before waking up, feeling frustrated. AFO questioned what was holding him back from taking action, noting that Izuku was clearly stronger. Izuku confessed his hatred for the other self, who always lingered in the back of his mind, but acknowledged that he was still a part of him, the person he had believed he was. AFO interrupted, reminding him that he was the real version of himself now, but he was second-guessing. AFO then revealed the truth about Izuku's admiration for All Might and why he had struggled against Bakugo until recently. He explained that Izuku's inability to defeat Bakugo stemmed from his desire to emulate him. No matter how much he learned, he couldn't develop the same intent to hurt as Bakugo. While Bakugo was the original painting, Izuku was merely a copy. However, the version of Izuku he was now had surpassed Bakugo because he was no longer defined by that comparison. Before leaving, AFO reminisced about the many camping trips they had taken together, but Izuku shook his head in confusion. AFO explained that he had brought Izuku along since he was very young, just learning to walk. He had taken Izuku to observe his plans rather than for camping adventures. As memories flooded back, Izuku felt a wave of shock at the dark deeds they had committed together. He jumped out of bed, removed his shirt, and rushed to the mirror on the wall. Turning his back to it, he examined the scars that marked his skin. Izuku recalled a moment when he had fought All Might's teacher, hiding in the rubble. AFO had used him as a ruse, and in a desperate attempt to prove he was serious about hurting Izuku, he had inflicted pain on him. As he looked at the scars running from his neck to his hip, he remembered how he had been taken from AFO and had fought back, using a knife against the teacher. AFO had then delivered the final blow, all of this occurring just after All Might had left the battlefield. AFO acknowledged that after leaving Izuku, Inko had nurtured him, and he had met Bakugo, which explained his lack of memory. With a smile, AFO urged Izuku to sleep again and confront the other version of himself. Izuku climbed back into bed and slowly drifted off, finding himself on the same rooftop once more, but this time, he was determined to win the fight. Meanwhile, Bakugo lay in a hospital, unconscious. Aizawa expressed his frustration, insisting they could not wait for Izuku's next move, as a student could be in danger at any moment. He turned to All Might, demanding that if he could not act, he should leave it to the others. All Might retorted, questioning how Aizawa thought they could succeed without vision. He pointed out that they had failed to save Izuku when he was in a vulnerable position. Aizawa, feeling the urgency of the situation, declared that he could not sit idly by while his students were in danger. All Might sighed, realizing that Aizawa was right. He picked up his jacket, but Aizawa insisted he stay, arguing that All Might would be of no use if he still viewed Izuku as a hero. All Might struggled with the truth, revealing that Izuku had two distinct personalities, the Izuku they knew and the one he was now. Aizawa understood the weight of All Might's words, knowing he wouldn't make such a claim lightly. He insisted that Izuku was now a villain, having already harmed both Bakugo and himself. Bakugo, awakening, chuckled at the realization of Izuku's transformation. All Might approached him, surprised he was conscious. Bakugo confronted All Might, questioning how he had allowed Izuku to become this way, given the influence he had over him. He expressed his regret, acknowledging that he had contributed to Izuku's struggles and feelings of worthlessness since childhood. All Might stood in silence, grappling with his own guilt. He admitted that AFO had manipulated him, leading to his failure to protect Izuku. Bakugo, still in distress, felt the weight of his own actions, believing he had pushed Izuku to the brink. Todoroki entered the room, accompanied by Aizawa and the rest of their class, all bandaged and bruised. The sight of his students, now quirkless, shook All Might to his core. He fell to his knees, overwhelmed by the realization that the Izuku they all knew was gone, replaced by something darker. Izuku sat happily at his desk, feeling a sense of pride as he thought about having all of his friends' quirks. His father entered the room, drawing Izuku's attention as he settled into his own chair across the room. Izuku glanced at AFO, curious about his father's feelings. AFO responded affirmatively, but Izuku sensed a hint of hesitation in his father's tone. Izuku's irritation grew as he pressed on, asking if he was AFO's favorite successor, better than Tamura. AFO confirmed this, seemingly falling into the trap Izuku had set. Izuku's voice took on a sharper edge as he inquired about when he could inherit all of AFO's power. AFO questioned Izuku's intentions, prompting Izuku to chuckle as he turned his chair to face his father directly. AFO laughed, suggesting that Izuku hadn't taken any drastic actions in a while and encouraged him to do so before turning against him. Izuku stood up and picked up a knife from AFO's desk, turning back with a grin. He reminded AFO of his promise, but just as he made a move toward AFO, his father caught his arm, preventing any harm. AFO sighed, noting that Izuku was holding back, implying that he wouldn't harm his own father. Izuku, feeling a wave of panic, questioned if it was because he wasn't truly himself. AFO reassured him that it was because he still had a purpose for him and was second-guessing himself. Izuku calmed down, expressing his frustration and demanding what was promised. AFO assured him that it would come soon and patted Izuku's head affectionately. Meanwhile, the news reported that UA had been shut down due to recent attacks on students, leading to a loss of confidence in the teacher's ability to ensure safety. Schools across the state were closed as a precaution. Aizawa addressed his students, explaining that Izuku's next move was clear. He aimed to undermine the citizens' faith in heroes. Momo pointed out that Izuku was intelligent enough to anticipate their reactions, while Todoroki agreed. The room fell silent as everyone contemplated their next steps. Kirishima expressed his frustration, feeling overwhelmed by the uncertainty of Izuku's plans. Aizawa acknowledged that Izuku had expertly instilled doubt in their minds. Tokoyami suggested they think like a villain and consider what Izuku might do. Momo proposed that he would wait for the heroes to make a move, while others shared various strategies, each more extreme than the last. Aizawa eventually intervened, urging them to focus on Izuku's perspective rather than their own. As they struggled to predict Izuku's next move, Todoroki sighed in defeat. All Might and Bakugo stood up, determined to take action. They announced their intention to visit Inko, Izuku's mother, to apologize for their past mistakes. Inko answered the door to find All Might and Bakugo kneeling before her. She was taken aback and firmly told them to leave. They expressed their remorse for contributing to Izuku's insecurities and failing him as mentors. Inko, however, was not swayed by their apologies and slammed the door, retreating into her home in distress. All Might pleaded for Inko to understand that he wished he could have been better for Midoriya, asking her to promise that she would keep Izuku away from him if they managed to bring him back. Bakugo, shocked by All Might's words, confronted him, insisting that he couldn't abandon Izuku. He warned that leaving would make All Might just like Izuku's father. All Might replied that the decision was not his to make, but Inko's. She opened the door slightly, observing Bakugo's grip on All Might. Inko stated that if they could rescue her son, she would consider forgiving them, but ultimately, it would be up to Izuku to decide if he wanted them in his life. On the walk back to the hospital with Bakugo, All Might reflected on Inko's saddened face. Bakugo interrupted his thoughts, expressing concern about Izuku's transformation. He questioned whether they could restore Izuku to his former self. All Might, unsure of the situation, placed his hand on his face, grappling with the rapid changes occurring around them. Bakugo, with a hint of optimism, reminded All Might that he had just asked Inko if he could resign as Izuku's father, suggesting that he believed there was still hope for Izuku's return. All Might admitted his uncertainty, revealing the weight of his actions that had caused Izuku pain. He feared that if they were able to bring Izuku back to normal, he might not want to see All Might again after his previous rejection. The scars on Izuku's body served as a painful reminder of All Might's mistakes, but he resolved to confront his guilt and strive to be better for Izuku. Bakugo understood the emotional turmoil All Might faced and chose to pause the conversation, recognizing how difficult it would be for All Might to face Izuku. Upon returning to the classroom, All Might found his students deep in thought about Izuku's next moves. He took a seat on one of the beds and inquired about their thoughts. Izuku, leaning against the door with a satisfied expression, responded that they had come up with nothing. The class and their teachers were surprised to see him, and he playfully reminded them to be quiet since they were in a hospital. All Might stepped forward, concerned for his students' safety, and asked if Izuku's plan involved surrounding and confronting them. Izuku casually revealed that he had acquired a new quirk but had unintentionally caused destruction in the process. He reassured them that he had called for help for the person affected, displaying a carefree attitude. Aizawa, curious, asked who the quirk belonged to. Izuku responded with a laugh, revealing that he was once All Might's successor. He took pleasure in the thought of Aizawa's impending heartbreak and excitedly mentioned the chaos he had caused, which caused Aizawa to panic. Izuku gleefully announced that he had received a reward from his father, the ability to take others' quirks. He expressed his affection for his father and his newfound power. As Bakugo rushed toward Izuku, he was met with a stern warning to avoid using his real name, which Izuku despised. He insisted on being called Deku, the name that had been used against him by friends at UA. Bakugo confronted Izuku, expressing concern for Inko and the rest of the class. As Bakugo approached, Izuku warned him to back off, his irritation evident. When Bakugo ignored him, All Might also moved closer, prompting Izuku to react. His voice echoed as he commanded everyone to stop breathing, using Shinso's quirk to instill panic among his classmates. As the students struggled to breathe, Izuku laughed at their predicament, reminding them that they should have heeded his warning. One by one, they fell to the ground, gasping for air. Izuku contemplated who to target first, humorously suggesting All Might. He stepped on All Might's wrist, relishing the moment as he threatened to crush the symbol of peace. The tension escalated as everyone watched in horror, All Might's hand beginning to bleed from the pressure. Uraraka, on the verge of tears, pleaded for Izuku to stop. However, Izuku approached her with a face full of mock pity, enjoying the fleeting hope in her eyes before dismissing it. As he walked toward the door, he reveled in the chaos he had caused, expressing his delight in witnessing their suffering. Suddenly, he charged at Bakugo, delivering a powerful kick to his face while he was down, laughing at the irony of their shared experiences. Returning to All Might, Izuku finally released everyone from his hold, allowing them to gasp for air. He informed them that they would soon be too dizzy to stand, and their fun would come to an end. All Might, nursing his injured hand, questioned the purpose of Izuku's actions. Izuku explained that he wanted society to understand that hospitals were no longer safe and to give them a glimpse of his capabilities, preparing them for the battles that lay ahead. With a smile, he left the room, leaving his classmates in shock. Several weeks passed, and everyone had fully recovered, but Izuku had been busy in the meantime, eliminating some pro-heroes. Aizawa stood before his class with a walking stick and announced that Izuku was preparing for war. He acknowledged that not all of them were strong without their quirks and offered those who wished to leave the battlefield the chance to do so. When the conflict broke out, they would need all the strength they could muster. Allmight added that they would not judge anyone who chose to leave. The students lowered their heads, contemplating their abilities, and slowly, many of them exited the room. It was disheartening to see so many leave, as it highlighted their reliance on their quirks. Allmight addressed Todoroki, Bakugo, Shinso, Azui, Ida, Kirishima, and Uraraka, asking if they were certain about staying. Uraraka confirmed her decision with clenched fists. Allmight explained that they would be briefed on their strategy. Since Izuku had their quirks, they would need to use their knowledge of their own quirks' weaknesses to stand a chance against him. He illustrated this with an example of Aizawa, who had once cancelled his own quirk by looking into a mirror, causing his eyes to burn and making him want to shut them. Allmight then revealed that they would attempt to put special glasses on Izuku, which had mirror lenses that would not come off unless one knew how to flick a hidden switch at the back. He distributed 2 pairs of glasses to each student. Aizawa added that if Izuku used fire, they should find water. If he spoke to them, they should not respond, and if he grabbed them, they must fight back to escape his grasp. He emphasized that hesitation could lead to dire consequences. Meanwhile, Izuku encountered Endeavor, the father of Todoroki and Dabi, as he walked through the city streets at night. Izuku remarked on Endeavor's reputation, noting that he had killed Dabi, but corrected himself by saying that Bakugo had done it, although he had intended to finish the job himself. He laughed, turning his back on Endeavor. Endeavor acknowledged that Allmight had warned him about Izuku, referring to him as the hero and villain killer, someone not to be underestimated. Izuku expressed his delight at having a name for himself, giggling as he put his hands in his pockets. He taunted Endeavor about being the #1 hero but still being behind Allmight. Endeavor, confused, noted that Allmight gave Izuku warnings, and his anger flared as he listened to Izuku's taunts. Izuku dodged Endeavor's fiery punch, mocking him for being unable to land a hit. He continued to provoke Endeavor, suggesting that if he couldn't defeat Izuku, he might as well take it out on Shoto. In a fit of rage, Endeavor grabbed Izuku by the throat, his uncontrolled flames scorching Izuku's neck as he slammed him into the ground. Despite the pain, Izuku laughed, spitting blood and a tooth into Endeavor's face, revealing that he had achieved his goal of provoking him. As chaos erupted around them, with fire consuming the city and screams echoing in the night, Izuku taunted Endeavor further. Endeavor, consumed by anger, threatened to kill Izuku, who responded with laughter, urging him to do so. As Endeavor tightened his grip on Izuku's throat, Izuku gasped for air, clutching the ground instead of Endeavor's arms, his face turning red as blood trickled from his eyes. Endeavor, witnessing Izuku's struggle, finally released him. Izuku gasped for breath, holding his burnt neck and smiling weakly as he lay back on the ground. He remarked that Endeavor did have a heart and suggested he show it to Shoto. Izuku then questioned Endeavor about his next move, whether he would save the people crying for help or stay with him. Endeavor replied that if he let Izuku go, he would cause more harm. Izuku sighed, looking up at the orange glow in the night sky with a sad smile, urging Endeavor to go save them and to tell Allmight to meet him at his statue. Endeavor stood up and walked toward the nearest voice, while Izuku, still dizzy from being thrown to the ground, stumbled in the opposite direction, favoring his sore leg. Izuku sat down, exhausted and injured, leaning against Allmight's statue. He felt overwhelmed by the chaos surrounding him. With flames, destruction, and the cries of those in need echoing in his ears, he muttered to himself that he was tired of it all. Knowing that Allmight wouldn't receive his message until Endeavor finished rescuing the civilians, which would take about an hour, he closed his eyes and drifted into a troubled sleep. In his dream, he found himself on the same rooftop as before, but this time, he encountered a different version of himself. This alternate Izuku appeared frightened and vulnerable, crouching on the ground with his hands over his head, tears streaming down his face. The scared boy asked if Izuku intended to harm him too, his voice trembling. Confused by the sight, Izuku responded affirmatively, feeling an unsettling mix of emotions. The child screamed in fear, which only irritated Izuku further. He demanded silence, but the boy continued to cry, escalating Izuku's frustration. In a moment of anger, he pulled out a knife, approaching the trembling child with unsteady hands. The boy cried out in terror, too frightened to flee. In a fit of rage, Izuku lashed out, the knife piercing the air as he struck. He shouted that if the boy would just stop crying, this wouldn't be happening. With each move, he felt a mix of anger and sorrow, eventually dropping the knife as tears filled his eyes. He mourned the loss of this version of himself, overwhelmed by the weight of his actions. Izuku awoke to the sensation of fingers on his cheeks. All Might and Bakugo were there, trying to gently wake him as they carefully placed mirrored glasses around his head, nearly touching his tear-streaked face. Panic filled their expressions when they realized he was awake. Startled, Izuku pushed All Might away with his foot, causing him to stumble back. At the same time, Bakugo seized his throat, pinning him against the wall with one hand while attempting to secure the glasses over his eyes with the other. Izuku struggled, trying to kick Bakugo off, but his position was unfavorable. He noticed All Might regaining his footing behind Bakugo. Bakugo wrestled with the glasses, but Izuku fought back, trying to remove them. In a sudden surge of panic, he switched tactics and jabbed his fingers toward Bakugo's eyes, causing him to recoil in pain. This gave Izuku the opportunity to kick All Might in a vulnerable spot, taking advantage of the moment. As they quickly recovered, Izuku coughed and remarked on their tactics, rubbing the tears from his eyes. He glanced at the glasses they had been trying to put on him and realized their strategy. If he couldn't see, it would limit his abilities significantly. He was impressed and curious about whose idea it had been. All Might and Bakugo exchanged glances, surprised by his insight. Izuku smiled, feeling a sense of relief and excitement at the prospect of the battle ahead. He then sensed the presence of others nearby and called out, wondering who else was hiding. Kirishima, Azui, and Ida stepped out from behind Bakugo and All Might. Izuku felt a twinge of disappointment at the small number of allies. He noticed Kirishima standing close to Bakugo, smirking as they all watched him intently. With a playful grin, Izuku lifted his arm, pointing his hand like a gun. He expressed his fascination with blood, admiring its color and the way it splattered upon impact. Suddenly, he flicked his hand, mimicking the sound of a gunshot. Bakugo turned just in time to see Kirishima collapsing to the ground, having been struck. Izuku reveled in the power of his quirk, which allowed his fingers to act like the barrels of a gun. With a light flick, his nails transformed and fired toward his target. He watched with a smirk as Bakugo rushed to catch Kirishima before he hit the ground, the reality of the situation settling in. Bakugo grabbed Kirishima and fell to the ground in shock, tears streaming down his face. Izuku rolled his head to crack his neck and flexed his fingers. He questioned why Bakugo cared now when he had always pushed everyone away. Frustrated, Bakugo sprang up, attempting to grab Izuku in anger, but Izuku effortlessly dodged his attempts. All Might shouted for Bakugo to stop as the others hurried to prevent him from attacking Izuku, still trying to process the fact that Izuku had easily defeated Kirishima. Izuku's eyes glowed green as his arms transformed into sharp scythe blades right before their eyes. Bakugo halted, realizing it would be unwise to attack someone wielding such a dangerous quirk. Izuku, with a mischievous grin and dark circles under his eyes, taunted Bakugo, raising his scythe arm high. Bakugo panicked, tripping backward and raising his arms to shield his face. In a swift motion, Izuku swung his arm, leaving Bakugo in agony on the ground. As Bakugo writhed in pain, Izuku looked down at him with a satisfied expression. His scythe arm, now stained, scraped against the ground as he turned his attention to the others. He flicked his arm, sending small droplets of Bakugo's blood splattering across their faces. A smile crept onto Izuku's face as he noticed All Might with the blood on him, while All Might inhaled sharply, clearly unsettled. Bakugo continued to scream in pain, and the group was unsure of what to do next. Izuku's arms returned to normal, and Bakugo needed to exit the battlefield, while the others remained hidden, hesitant to reveal themselves. All Might knew he couldn't approach Izuku due to Shinso's quirk affecting him. Irritated by the tension, Izuku rolled his eyes and urged them to make a move. As he began to walk toward them, his spine twisted and cracked, and blood began to flow as if something was about to emerge from his back. Suddenly, a gunshot rang out, and Izuku fell to his bleeding knee, shaking from the pain. His hands twitched as he turned around, overwhelmed with shame and disbelief, covering his face with his hands and crying out for them not to look at him. All Might, shocked, realized that Inko was the one who had shot Izuku. Inko dropped the gun, her mouth agape in shock at her son's behavior. She slowly approached him, asking what had gotten into him, her words tormenting Izuku's mind. Inko embraced him as he sat there, paralyzed by the realization that he could not hurt his own mother. He began to breathe heavily, battling the turmoil within his mind. All Might noticed the rapid shift in Izuku's expression, from a delirious smile to the tears of a boy he feared he had lost. Cautiously, All Might approached Izuku with a pair of mirrored glasses, careful not to make any sudden movements that might disrupt whatever was happening in his mind. Bakugo, struggling with pain, quietly called out to All Might, warning him that All for One was present. Turning his head, he saw a sinister-looking man in a suit walking calmly toward the group. All Might recognized the threat and quickly secured the glasses over Izuku's face. He asked Inko if she could get Izuku out of there. She nodded, still quietly crying, upset that she had to shoot her own son to prevent him from harming those he once cared for. AFO, having finally arrived on the battlefield, sneered at them to not interfere. All Might stood protectively in front of Inko, while Todoroki, Shinso, and the others jumped out to surround All for One. Inko and All Might were suddenly pushed aside, away from Izuku, who was crying and twitching on the ground. Then, Izuku screamed, capturing everyone's attention. Small flames of various colors began to emanate from his body, ice froze the ground beneath him, and rocks floated around him. The wind swirled fiercely, vines grew from his veins and burrowed into the icy ground, his teeth sharpened, and his fingernails elongated. Electricity flickered around him, and blood flowed from his wounds, eyes, nostrils, and mouth as his bones snapped and relocated repeatedly. Izuku's eyes changed colors as he screamed, and everyone called out to him in disbelief. Izuku screamed in distress, and All Might quickly regained his footing as the others engaged AFO to create a distraction. Something was wrong with Izuku, and All Might sensed that AFO was fully aware of what was happening with him. All Might recognized that the Izuku he knew was present, not the other personality that had threatened them all. The Izuku who had once lost control of his quirks was now struggling to manage them, as if he were using them for the first time. Hope surged within All Might. He approached, noticing the air swirling dangerously around Izuku. He understood that entering the turbulent flow would be perilous, so he braced himself and reached out. As his fingertips pierced the chaotic air, the force yanked his arm back, resulting in broken fingers. Izuku was right in front of him, still screaming and bleeding, while Inko lay unconscious, having been thrown aside by AFO. All Might clenched his fists, trying to suppress the pain, and began to walk through the tempest, tearing his shirt and feeling the sting of debris against his skin. He pushed through the storm, calling out to Izuku, determined to reach him. He yelled that he would not abandon him again, and as he fell to Izuku's side, he embraced him, calming the wild quirks that had been unleashed. Tears streamed down Izuku's face, slipping beneath the mirrored glasses perched on his head. He shivered in All Might's arms, his temperature fluctuating wildly. All Might called for everyone to retreat with Izuku, overwhelmed with joy at having him back. Relief washed over the group. They had finally achieved a victory. AFO, however, remained unimpressed by All Might's success, unconcerned about Izuku being taken from him once more by the man he derisively referred to as a fake father. Izuku, trembling in shock, fear, and pain, struggled to see through his glasses as he called out to All Might. All Might reassured him, promising that he was there for him, which irritated AFO. AFO attempted to undermine All Might's confidence, taunting him about feeling victorious. The students rallied behind All Might, forming a protective wall around Bakugo, Kirishima, and Inko. Determination ignited in their eyes. They had Izuku back and AFO was alone. Endeavor made a surprise appearance, joining their ranks. Other heroes, both quirked and quirkless, also stepped forward, ready to combat the flames that had engulfed the area, leaving behind the embers to face AFO. They stood united in front of AFO, shielding Izuku from him. This display of bravery unnerved AFO, who gulped, trying to mask his anxiety at the sight of such a formidable opposition. He acknowledged their courage, albeit with a hint of confusion about why other heroes had joined them after what Izuku had done. Allmight interrupted AFO, declaring fiercely that he would not allow AFO to harm his son. The intensity of Allmight's glare struck fear into AFO, serving as a stern warning to keep his distance. AFO, attempting to maintain his composure, stated that he would not engage such a large group of heroes at once. He bid them farewell, ominously assuring Izuku that he would soon return to his normal self before disintegrating into the air. As AFO vanished, Allmight embraced Izuku, who nodded weakly, fighting against the pain. Allmight expressed his joy at Izuku's safety, and the group shared smiles, relieved to see him back on their side. Bakugo managed a smile before succumbing to unconsciousness from blood loss. Allmight's thoughts drifted back to the moment Izuku had been kidnapped so easily, when everyone had struggled to comprehend the truth about Izuku's father. They had irrationally labeled Izuku a villain before realizing he was just a child unaware of his father's true nature. He reflected on the disgrace of judging someone based on their parentage as he stood with Izuku in his arms. Izuku whispered that he always felt his father lurking in the back of his mind. He recalled how, during the sports festival, he had felt as though he had an extra hand guiding his punches and throws, amplifying his strength, despite the strangeness of the sensation. His voice cracked as he mentioned feeling sad for his father, who seemed so lonely. Allmight looked down at Izuku, seeing the tears mixed with blood on his cheeks. Allmight assured Izuku that he was safe now and expressed deep remorse for what had happened to him. Izuku broke down, confessing his guilt over the harm he had caused to others. Allmight comforted him, affirming that it wasn't his fault. As they made their way to the ambulance that had just arrived, Allmight's fingers trembled from the injuries he had sustained while trying to reach Izuku. Aizawa, standing by the ambulance, had been unable to assist in the battle, knowing that his presence would not have been enough. Izuku was loaded into the ambulance, accompanied by Allmight and Aizawa, as they prepared to move forward from the chaos. He reached out his hand and grabbed Aizawa by the arm, unable to see clearly through his glasses. Aizawa felt Izuku's grip and recognized him. As Aizawa's vision began to clear, he adjusted to the light and saw Allmight, who was visibly injured, and Izuku, who bore the marks of his own quirk's backlash, bruised and battered. The sight was distressing for Aizawa, who couldn't help but look away, feeling a deep sense of concern for his student. Allmight was astonished that Izuku had managed to restore Aizawa's eyesight. However, Izuku's voice trembled with uncertainty as he expressed his inability to help Kirishima. Aizawa processed the painful reality of losing a student, covering his mouth to stifle any sound, not wanting Izuku to notice his distress. Tears welled in Aizawa's eyes as he glanced at Allmight, who was also trying to maintain composure for Izuku's sake. Allmight had finally returned to his true self, bringing joy to everyone around him. The atmosphere was filled with excitement as his friends celebrated his comeback. The story was progressing well, nearing completion at about 65 to 70%. As the characters navigated through their challenges, they faced intense battles that tested their strength and resolve. Each encounter was filled with tension, showcasing their determination and bravery without delving into graphic details. The bonds between the characters deepened, and their shared experiences brought them closer together. They supported one another through thick and thin, embodying the spirit of camaraderie that defined their journey. With the narrative moving forward, anticipation built for what was to come next. The characters were ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, united in their purpose and driven by their dreams. Stop. 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 Izuku thrashed in his sleep, his bed rattling as he twisted left and right. Get away from me, he shouted, jolting awake from his nightmare. Midoriya. You are safe now. Aizawa held him down gently by his wrists. Izuku blinked, his eyes adjusting to the soft light of the room. It took him a moment to remember what had happened the day before, and he jerked upright. "I am sorry for the noise I must have made just now," he apologized before collapsing back onto the bed. Aizawa chuckled, a hint of relief in his voice as he settled back into the chair beside him. "What's so funny?" Izuku asked, curious. "You're still you, the overly polite child, even after everything you've just endured," Aizawa replied, a smile forming as he put eye drops into his tired eyes. Izuku managed a small smile at Aizawa's words. "Oh yeah, I'll take those glasses off for you," Aizawa added, reaching over to gently remove the headgear with a special key designed for that purpose. As Izuku's eyes adjusted to the light, he could only see part of Aizawa leaning over him. He raised a hand to his blind eye. "I can't see anything." Aizawa's expression shifted momentarily, surprised by the sight of Izuku's blind eye, which had turned black with a white iris. "Where is All Might?" Izuku asked, lowering his hand back to the bed, unaware of Aizawa's brief surprise. "In the next room, he's recovering," Aizawa replied. "And my mom?" Izuku inquired. "Further down the hall." "She'll be okay, everyone is." "Don't worry," Aizawa reassured him. "What happened with Kirishima?" Izuku started, but Aizawa interrupted him. "Do you understand how your mind switching works?" Izuku recognized Aizawa's intent and was fine with it. Taking a deep breath, he explained, "When he was in control, I could see everything that happened, but I couldn't interact easily. I could only engage with him when he fell asleep." Aizawa listened intently, as did All Might, who had awakened to Izuku's screams and was listening from the other side of the wall. "We were always in the same place, the rooftop where I learned the truth about All Might. Each time I met him, I was a little different, more shy, more nerdy. You understand what I mean?" Izuku closed his eyes. For some reason, each trait of mine he eliminated, but when he woke up, that part of me wasn't gone. It was like I was reborn or something. I feel different though, as if modified. Modified? Aizawa echoed. "Yeah, my mind feels a bit irritated. Which isn't really me." Izuku's eye began to twitch, and a flicker of a smile appeared as he repeated the word. "Irritated. Irritated by all of you. All of you. You fake heroes." His hands began to tremble. "You are all just a waste of time. I could take you all down for your selfishness." Aizawa quickly pushed Izuku back down onto the bed as he tried to get up. "I'll take every last one of you self-righteous fools." "Young Midoriya," All Might called from the doorway, blood trickling from his mouth. Izuku calmed at the sight of him, realizing how quickly his mindset had shifted, which made him cry in shock. Covering his mouth, tears streamed down his cheeks. He understood that everything he had just said would only deepen the pain of what they had made him feel. "I'm sorry," he cried. "I'm so sorry." Aizawa embraced him as he broke down, repeating his apologies. All Might stepped in and joined the hug. "It's okay, young Midoriya." "I'm so sorry," he whispered over and over, holding them both tightly. "My young Midoriya, stop apologizing. None of this is your fault," All Might assured him, reinforcing this truth in Izuku's mind, which made him cry tears of joy. Later, as Izuku drifted back to sleep, All Might and Aizawa stepped outside to discuss his current state near the door located downstairs, just beneath Izuku's resting place. Unbeknownst to them, a quirkless boy stealthily entered Izuku's room. Izuku woke abruptly as he was thrown against the wall, causing him to cough up blood. Struggling to catch his breath, he tried to open his eyes, but a kick to his stomach forced them shut again. SSE-O.P, he managed to plead as the kicks continued, each one landing harder than the last. "You idiot, Deku!" Bakugo shouted, slamming him against the wall with a fierce kick that broke one of Izuku's ribs and injured one of Bakugo's toes. "I hate you," his voice echoed through the hospital, alerting Aizawa and All Might. Izuku coughed blood onto the floor, clutching his chest in pain. He looked up to see Bakugo, tears streaming down his face, filled with anger. "I can't be calm. I can't control my stupid temper," he yelled as All Might and Aizawa rushed in, grabbing Bakugo by the shoulders to prevent him from attacking Izuku again. "I've always envied that about you, Deku." You're always calm. I hate it. Bakugo cried, his body relaxing as he fell to his knees. Izuku watched as Bakugo's tears flowed freely. I don't know how to be nice, he admitted, collapsing onto the floor as All Might and Aizawa loosened their grip. I'm sorry, Izuku. That's what I meant all these years. Bakugo whispered angrily. He slowly raised his head to meet Izuku's gaze. I'm sorry, he cried, his eyes filled with sincerity. Izuku looked at Bakugo, struggling to rise from the floor to his knees before him. His voice trembled as he spoke. Kaken? I've been waiting to hear that. From you for so long. Izuku's heart soared as if all the burdens had been lifted. Bakugo reached over and hugged Izuku, and for the first time, Izuku smiled through his sadness. Izuku could feel his other half crying in the depths of his mind, mirroring his own emotions. Izuku had requested All Might to be by his side at all times, and All Might was more than happy to accept that request. His worries about Izuku not wanting to see him anymore were finally put to rest. All Might had been staying with Izuku in the hospital, resembling a father with a young child. This arrangement was necessary due to Izuku's troubling dreams, which caused him to kick and flail, using his quirks uncontrollably. Only All Might or Aizawa could calm him down with their presence. When Izuku was alone, he would thrash about in bed, but when someone he trusted was nearby, he would either sleep peacefully or remain still, save for the sound of his breathing. A special facility had been constructed for Izuku, hidden away from society, known only to a select few. An army officer informed All Might that it was time for Izuku to be transported. All Might gently rubbed Izuku's shoulder to wake him, noting the dark circles under his eyes from lack of sleep. Izuku was blindfolded and handcuffed to All Might, with Aizawa accompanying them for extra protection. There had been attempts to kidnap Izuku while he rested in his bed, motivated by his unique powers, but these attempts were always thwarted by Aizawa or All Might. As they walked, Izuku fought to stay awake, surrounded by army officers and a few heroes still able to use their quirks. He felt weak. His own quirks had harmed him during his sleep, requiring recovery girls healing every morning. They made their way to the facility, located deep in the forest to avoid detection. Any visible transport would attract unwanted attention, posing a risk if villains discovered Izuku's whereabouts. Suddenly, a man stepped in front of them, commanding them to halt. He informed All Might that the heroes could leave, as Midoriya was now their responsibility. All Might recognized the man as someone who held significant power over the laws governing heroes, a key figure in shaping society. The man extended his hand, demanding Izuku be handed over. All Might, protective of Izuku, insisted they could still walk him the remaining distance. The man, slightly irritated, reassured them that Izuku would be safe with them. All Might, however, refused to let go, pulling Izuku closer, sensing something was amiss. Aizawa, aware of the unusual request for Izuku, stood beside All Might, ready for anything. Reluctantly, the man turned and led the way, with All Might and Aizawa following cautiously. Izuku, his voice hoarse from his restless sleep, whispered to All Might, seeking reassurance. All Might comforted him, closing his fist around Izuku's hand, leaving only his pinky finger free for Izuku to hold. Upon reaching the entrance, Izuku's blindfold was removed. The man explained that the facility was designed like a maze to prevent escape and ensure security. He would escort Izuku to his room, dismissing the heroes. All Might noticed Izuku's demeanor change as he stepped forward, drawn to the darkness inside, intrigued by the scents wafting from within. Concerned, All Might grasped Izuku's wrist, but Izuku reassured him, insisting he wouldn't harm anyone. All Might's grip relaxed, allowing Izuku to step away. As he was led inside, All Might called out that he would visit every day. Izuku turned back, smiling brightly and waving before the doors closed, separating him from the outside world. All Might settled under a tree, arms crossed, waiting for the next. Aizawa raised an eyebrow, curious about his friend's unusual behavior. All Might simply stated he was waiting for tomorrow, prompting Aizawa to laugh in disbelief. All Might opened one eye to glance at Aizawa, who sighed and sat beside him. All Might smiled, teasing Aizawa about his protective nature towards Shinso, suggesting he was also acting like a father to Izuku. Aizawa looked away, embarrassed, dismissing the notion. Allmight's laughter erupted, causing him to cough slightly. Meanwhile, Izuku was navigating the facility, driven by an overwhelming scent that captivated him. He raced through the maze, his adrenaline surging as he searched for the source. Suddenly, his leg gave out, causing him to tumble to the ground. He felt a strange numbness, as if his body had lost control. Ignoring the pain, he continued to pursue the scent, finally arriving at a dimly lit area with a chair and a table. Just as he began to regain his senses, a doctor emerged from the shadows, causing Izuku to panic. This was the same doctor who had once told him he lacked a quirk. Izuku unexpectedly succumbed to sleep, overwhelmed by the scent. The doctor explained that inhaling too much of it could weaken his body. As Izuku lay unconscious, he felt needles and chemicals being injected into him, his body trembling uncontrollably. He was now a test subject, subjected to experiments to determine what quirks could heal his injuries. The next morning, Aizawa was jolted awake by Allmight banging on the door, demanding it be opened. Aizawa, irritated by the noise, glared at Allmight, who was clearly anxious about Izuku's situation. Aizawa stood up and sighed, urging Allmight to keep it down. Suddenly, a massive creature burst through the door, causing both Aizawa and Allmight to stumble backward from the impact. The creature soared over their heads and landed in a tree behind them. They turned to face the creature, which had white skin and a long tail that extended from its spine. One of its hands appeared to be made entirely of bones. It leaped to the ground, its feet resembling those of a hawk. As it walked, its bones made unsettling cracking sounds. The creature was tall and thin, with blood dripping from its mouth. It began to stagger away, swaying from side to side. Allmight took off after it, while Aizawa hesitated, torn between following and checking on Midoriya. Just then, men rushed out of the door that had been broken open. Aizawa called out in panic, asking about the child. One of the men, catching his breath, confirmed that it was indeed the child. In that moment, Aizawa sprinted after Allmight, frustration bubbling within him as he thought about their lack of trust in others. He quickly caught up to Allmight and unraveled his scarf. As the creature attempted to leap into the trees, Aizawa managed to grab its foot. Its attention shifted to him and Allmight on the ground. The creature seized Aizawa, holding him tightly in its mouth, its teeth pressing against his skin. Allmight, filled with panic, shouted for Aizawa to stay back, while Aizawa, enduring the pain, managed to inform him that it was Midoriya. Allmight took a deep breath, kneeling on the ground as he looked into Izuku's eyes, calling out his name with urgency. Allmight reached out his hand and called to Izuku, who was holding Aizawa in his mouth, slowly flattening him with his jaws. He whispered, urging Izuku to come closer. Aizawa coughed, and Allmight continued, suggesting they go see Inko, Izuku's mother. As Allmight's fingers brushed against Aizawa's scarf, which was tangled in Izuku's teeth, Izuku's breathing became slow and calm under Allmight's touch on his forehead. Aizawa watched in amazement at Allmight's calm demeanor. Gradually, Izuku's body began to revert to that of a little boy, gently placing Aizawa on the ground. Izuku's eyes appeared lifeless, tears streaming down his cheeks, reflecting a sense of hopelessness. Allmight tended to Aizawa's wounds while Izuku sat against a tree, arms crossed, falling asleep almost instantly. Aizawa removed his shirt, allowing Allmight to wrap his scarf around him as a makeshift bandage. Aizawa inquired about the trick, and Allmight explained that Izuku had shape-shifted before, even in his sleep. Once Allmight finished tying the knot, he helped Aizawa up, noting that Izuku had fallen asleep, which was not surprising. Allmight urged Aizawa to help take Izuku to Inko, suggesting they could hide there until the search for Izuku subsided, as he would now be considered a fugitive. Aizawa froze at the mention of a nickname, his eyes glowing red and his hair lifting slightly. Izuku, half asleep, chuckled at their conversation, drawing their attention. As they walked toward his home, Aizawa expressed his annoyance at being called that, kicking a rock while half hidden in his scarf. At 10 p.m., Inko answered the door to see two hooded figures, Allmight and Aizawa. Allmight had Izuku tucked under his jumper, his face barely visible. They rushed inside, and Inko realized they had brought Izuku back. She whispered his name as she held him tightly, still asleep. After rescuing Izuku from AFO, the plan was for him to return to Inko, but his sleeping issues posed a danger to her. Izuku was laid in his bed, and All Might tucked him in before stepping out to join Inko and Aizawa in the lounge. Inko anxiously asked if Izuku was okay, to which Aizawa bluntly replied that he was sick. All Might sighed at Aizawa's directness, adding that while Izuku was unwell, he wouldn't die. Aizawa explained that Izuku hadn't experienced his other personality for a while, but that didn't mean it wasn't still present. He elaborated that Izuku's many quirks were clashing, and only his other self could manage their flow. Inko interrupted, confused, prompting All Might to use an analogy about Izuku's quirks being like cups of food coloring. Aizawa added that while one side of Izuku could keep the colors separate, the current Izuku had them all mixed together. Just then, Izuku emerged from his bedroom, looking tired. He grabbed a cup as objects began to float toward him, helping him make coffee. All Might and Aizawa were surprised to see him up, despite his exhaustion. Izuku casually mentioned to his mother that he intended to confront his father, taking a sip of his coffee as items returned to their places. Inko, All Might, and Aizawa exchanged bewildered looks, unsure of what he meant. Izuku placed his cup down, noticing their expressions and asking what was wrong. He explained that sometimes to do good, one must take on the role of the bad guy, admitting that he was already seen as a villain by the world. With a sigh, he returned to his bedroom to change into clean clothes. All Might approached Izuku, still trying to process his words about confronting his father. As he opened the door, he noticed a large scar running down Izuku's back. Concerned, All Might asked how he got it. Izuku paused, recalling the day he had helped in a tragic event. His voice faltered as he mentioned it was from assisting his father in a dark deed. Pushing past All Might, he walked out, leaving All Might in shock. Aizawa noticed All Might's stillness and sensed something was wrong. He called out to Izuku, grabbing his wrist as he tried to leave. Izuku insisted he couldn't be stopped, but Aizawa noticed a change in his eyes. Aizawa firmly commanded him to stay, while All Might struggled to contain his emotions, knowing the weight of Izuku's actions. Izuku reassured All Might that it was okay to cry, but then used a quirk to make himself untouchable, prompting Aizawa to release his grip. As Izuku stepped out, All Might remained frozen in place. Aizawa encouraged All Might to follow Izuku, and just then, Inko rushed out of the house, calling for her son, who was almost disappearing into the night. Izuku turned back, realizing he had forgotten something. Izuku turned to face his mother, pulling something from his pocket. He expressed his regret, stating that it would hurt, but it was necessary to ensure she wouldn't interrupt his battle. With tears in his eyes, he aimed a gun at Inko and, filled with sorrow, pulled the trigger. All Might and Aizawa rushed out to witness Inko falling backward in front of the doorway, a look of shock on her face. They turned to see Izuku dropping the gun, tears streaming down his cheeks as he turned away and vanished into the darkness of the night. Izuku issued a warning, stating that if anyone followed him, he would take drastic measures. This was not the Izuku they knew. Something had changed within him. AFO smiled with satisfaction as he observed Izuku crying from a distance. The journey to this point had been long, and the writer hoped readers would enjoy the chapter. There was a desire for Bakugo to eventually apologize for his past behavior towards Izuku, a moment everyone looked forward to. The anticipation for the release of My Hero Academia Season 4 was palpable, with the official date set for Saturday, October 12th. The writer eagerly awaited the developments in the story, particularly hoping to see more of Tamaki, whom they found endearing. The next chapter was expected soon, and gratitude was expressed to the readers for their support, which had kept the story going. The chapter had taken longer to complete than usual, and while the writer felt it might not be as interesting, they still believed it was acceptable. They acknowledged feeling uncertain about the previous chapter but promised that the next one would be better. The story was nearing completion, with about 80% of it done. Excitement built as the writer teased an upcoming boss fight, sharing that they had some great ideas for the scene. They were thrilled to be close to finishing the story, estimating it to be around 88% to 90% complete. The writer reminisced about listening to Five Nights at Freddy's songs when they first explored the online music world, finding it enjoyable to listen to while writing. Gratitude was expressed once again for the reader's support and encouragement, which meant a lot to the writer, especially during moments of self-doubt. They sent hugs to everyone and looked forward to the next update. Aizawa held on to All Might as he attempted to pursue Izuku. All Might, confused, demanded to be let go. Aizawa explained that they should not follow Izuku for now, as he had already harmed Inko to prevent her from interfering in his battle. He noted that Izuku could have harmed them too but chose not to. All Might's expression shifted to one of concern and sadness as he insisted he could not abandon Izuku again. Aizawa urged him to understand that Izuku wanted to face this challenge alone, and they needed to respect his wishes. Aizawa's words made All Might pause, recognizing the weight of the situation. He sighed, looking up at the stars, feeling the gravity of their circumstances. Meanwhile, Izuku wiped away his tears, his face devoid of emotion, as he entered an abandoned warehouse. AFO, watching from above, greeted him. Izuku acknowledged his father, who inquired about his quirks, noting their current stability. Izuku's eyes reflected his inner turmoil as he responded sharply, expressing his disdain for his name. AFO taunted him, suggesting that his hatred stemmed from the connection to his parents. When Izuku revealed that he had harmed his mother, AFO reacted with a mix of intrigue and expectation. As AFO turned away, he asked why Izuku was there. In response, Izuku activated a weapon, but AFO effortlessly countered it with one of his quirks. Izuku interrupted AFO, declaring his intent for assassination. His eyes glowed with determination as he dropped the weapon and lunged at his father. A massive explosion echoed in the distance, prompting All Might to recognize Izuku's power and urgency. Aizawa and All Might rushed to the scene, taking cover behind debris. They observed Izuku, whose ankle was injured and bloodied, reminiscent of his previous battles. Despite his injuries, Izuku's adrenaline fueled his movements as he faced AFO, who praised him for his quick thinking in defense. Izuku, breathing heavily, leaped again, attempting to strike his father but was met with AFO's evasive maneuvers. In a moment of desperation, Izuku's fingers darkened as he prepared for a powerful attack. With a surge of energy, he unleashed a combination of quirks that struck AFO, sending them both flying apart. Though AFO was distanced, Izuku remained resolute. All Might watched in horror as Izuku's fingers bore the marks of their destructive power. He whispered encouragement, but Izuku remained focused on AFO, who was slowly recovering from the rubble. AFO, with half of his face damaged, commented on the force of Izuku's attack, reminiscing about his own battles. Izuku readied himself again, but AFO quickly closed the distance, capturing him and throwing him down. AFO taunted Izuku about their connection, but Izuku refused to give in, eventually finding a moment of clarity amidst the pain. As he lay on the ground, he noticed All Might and Aizawa waiting for an opportunity to assist him, while the sounds of his classmates approached. AFO's grip tightened as he inflicted pain, laughing at Izuku's predicament. Fueled by frustration, Izuku's eyes glowed once more. He declared his intent to fight back, using his legs to launch AFO headfirst into the ground. Standing tall despite his injuries, Izuku expressed his anger, revealing the truth of his father's manipulations. With a shift in demeanor, Izuku allowed his other self to take control, adopting a more confident stance. He confronted AFO, questioning his motives and the lack of a healing quirk. AFO, now standing and adjusting his jaw, prepared for the next move, both aware that the battle was far from over. Izuku charged at AFO, aiming to seize his arm. AFO responded by flicking his finger, unleashing a gust of wind to force Izuku back, but Izuku slid down between AFO's legs. Quickly regaining his footing, Izuku turned and grasped AFO's arm as he prepared to strike. With a grin, Izuku reveled in the thrill of the battle. He dug his fingers into AFO's arm and struck at his throat with a knife. AFO, startled, used his other arm to throw Izuku away, commenting on the trickery. Izuku laughed, lifting his head to face his father, showcasing the deep impressions his fingers had left on AFO's arm. In a surprising twist, he managed to tear off AFO's arm. Encouraging AFO to stop holding back, Izuku tossed the severed arm as a distraction and lunged at AFO from above. He combined the explosive power of Bakugo, Dabi's flames, Todoroki's ice, and the unique strength of One for All into his legs. AFO raised his hand to block Izuku's attack, but the impact of Izuku's kick was immense, breaking AFO's leg. Izuku fell to the side, unable to stand. He glanced back at AFO, who was admiring the damage done to his arm. AFO noted that Izuku had become vulnerable due to his reliance on his legs. As AFO approached, Izuku attempted to use his quirks to halt him, but it was futile. AFO hurled debris from the rubble, striking Izuku in the thighs and arms to immobilize him. With a sinister grin, AFO knelt down, preparing to place his hand on Izuku's head. He boasted about his ability to erase memories with a single touch. As AFO's hand made contact, Izuku screamed and writhed in agony. AFO taunted Aizawa, questioning when Izuku had returned his quirk. Aizawa, determined, replied that it was when Izuku had restored his eyesight. Allmight stood beside Aizawa, readying himself for action. As Allmight charged at AFO, Aizawa focused intently, trying not to blink. AFO quickly stood and pressed his foot onto Izuku's chest, pinning him down. Allmight transformed into his muscular form, preparing to strike. AFO smirked, confident that 5 seconds was insufficient. He lifted his foot, increasing the pressure on Izuku's chest. The sound of cracking echoed as AFO's foot pressed down, causing severe damage. In a moment of fury, Allmight punched AFO, sending him crashing through the debris. Allmight reverted to his weakened state, looking down at Izuku, whose injuries were grave. Blood spilled from Izuku's mouth as he gasped for air. Allmight cried out for Izuku, desperately freeing him from the debris. He held Izuku tightly, pleading for him to stay alive. Allmight rocked him back and forth, assuring him that he was safe, but Aizawa could only watch in despair. Aizawa reached for Allmight's shoulder, but hesitated, trying to process the reality of Izuku's condition. Allmight clung to Izuku, whispering reassurances, but the lifelessness in Izuku's eyes was undeniable. AFO approached Allmight and Aizawa, expressing satisfaction with Izuku's performance. Allmight, tears falling onto Izuku's shoulder, retorted that AFO was no father. AFO dismissed Allmight's accusation, blaming him and Nana for interfering with his plans. Allmight, fueled by anger, attempted to strike AFO again, but AFO caught his fist effortlessly. AFO taunted Allmight about the pain of witnessing his son's demise, further provoking him. The remaining UA students arrived, and Bakugo, upon seeing Izuku's lifeless form, felt a wave of disbelief wash over him. He slowly approached, struggling to comprehend the reality before him. Aizawa, aware of Bakugo's trembling, felt a surge of urgency. He needed to assist Allmight against AFO while grappling with the overwhelming situation. Aizawa realized how AFO dodged Allmight's attacks. It was as if he knew what Allmight would do before he acted. Then it hit him. Aizawa exclaimed that AFO had been treating this battle as if it were expected. His wording showed no surprise, indicating he had seen the outcome of the fight. Aizawa looked down at Izuku's lifeless body and questioned why AFO would kill him. Allmight, momentarily distracted by AFO, noticed Bakugo approaching Izuku's body. Seizing the opportunity, AFO grabbed Allmight by the throat. AFO taunted Allmight, pointing out his experience in battling villains but emphasizing that he couldn't learn from the mistake he had just made. His grip tightened, causing Allmight to struggle for breath. Aizawa sprang into action, directing his scarf toward AFO as he sprinted, ignoring Bakugo, who was too shocked to notice what was happening. He shouted for Bakugo to take Izuku and run, snapping him out of his trance. AFO observed as Aizawa's scarf neared Allmight. With his arm fully regenerated, AFO flicked his fingers, unleashing powerful gusts of wind that sent Aizawa crashing into a wall of rubble. The impact left Aizawa dazed, and he spat blood as he struggled to rise, pleading for AFO to stop. AFO smiled and released his grip on Allmight, allowing him to fall to the ground. He proposed a deal. He would bring Izuku back to life in exchange for Allmight's life. Allmight, rubbing his throat from the pain, repeated the phrase, contemplating the weight of the offer. As he looked back at Izuku, who was being carried away by Bakugo, All Might saw the shock on Bakugo's face and the struggle Aizawa faced to sit up straight. A tear rolled down All Might's cheek as he laughed, acknowledging that he had little time left to live. Aizawa, in a panic, rose as AFO placed his hand on All Might's head. He shouted in desperation, urging AFO to stop, and threw his scarf in an attempt to intervene. Time seemed to slow as Bakugo and the other students watched Aizawa rush toward All Might. All Might raised his hand, giving Aizawa a thumbs up, and smiled, telling him not to let him down. Aizawa cried out for him to stop, while All Might expressed his regret to young Midoriya. In a sudden, shocking moment, AFO unleashed a devastating attack, leaving All Might's body lifeless on the ground. Aizawa fell to his knees, overwhelmed by the loss. Just then, Izuku gasped for air and struggled out of Bakugo's arms. Though his chest was still injured and he wasn't healing, he felt no pain. Coughing, Izuku looked up to see Aizawa, tears streaming down his face, and then turned to see AFO and All Might's still form on the ground. Confused and concerned, he asked what was wrong with All Might. Aizawa stood up, trying to walk steadily toward Izuku. He grabbed Izuku's arm, lifting him off the ground. He wiped away his tears before picking Izuku up. Izuku protested, concerned for All Might's safety. He couldn't bear the thought of leaving him behind, believing that AFO would harm him. As they ran away from AFO with the other students, more tears streamed down Aizawa's face. Izuku, unaware of All Might's true condition, yelled out for him, thinking he was merely unconscious. Frustration bubbled within Izuku as Aizawa continued to ignore him. He demanded to be let go, struggling against Aizawa's hold. Aizawa, feeling annoyed, quickened his pace. Izuku clenched his fists and shouted again, insisting on his freedom. In a moment of desperation, he punched Aizawa in the cheek, causing him to lose his balance. Aizawa felt blood trickle from his nose as he scolded Izuku to listen. But then he noticed Izuku pick up a piece of wood from the debris of the destroyed buildings. Izuku assessed his injured leg, twisting it back into place with a grimace of pain. He then turned his attention to his other leg, which was severely injured. He took the piece of wood and braced himself before jamming it into his leg, feeling the sharp pain shoot through him. Aizawa urged Izuku to stop, but Izuku, filled with anger, refused to abandon All Might. Aizawa shouted that All Might was dead, which only fueled Izuku's determination as he stumbled back toward AFO, who was waiting for his return. Taking a deep breath, Izuku prepared himself for an imminent confrontation. He focused on the rhythm of his heartbeat, feeling the electricity surge through his body as he glanced at All Might lying on the ground beside AFO. In an instant he was upon AFO, his fingers digging into AFO's shoulder blades with incredible speed. AFO panicked, attempting to retaliate, but Izuku was too quick. In a swift motion he overpowered AFO, rendering him helpless. AFO felt his legs give way beneath him, the strength draining from his body as Izuku dislocated every bone in his legs. For a brief moment, AFO was suspended in the air, unable to support himself. Izuku hovered above him, ready to strike. His eyes glowed with determination as he prepared to deliver a decisive blow. AFO shouted for him to stop, but it was too late. Izuku's fist connected with AFO's forehead, slamming him into the ground. As the dust settled, Izuku sat on AFO, exhausted but resolute. He used his remaining strength to strike AFO's chest, feeling the weight of his actions. With each crushing blow, he expressed his anger and frustration, determined to make AFO suffer for his deeds. Tears streamed down Izuku's face, yet his expression remained calm. He felt his own body beginning to heal, but the pain lingered. Aizawa approached him, ready to ask a question, but Izuku stood up from AFO's defeated form. He explained that AFO had never intended to give him his quirks, and the only way to obtain them was to consume his heart. With a heavy heart, Izuku walked over to All Might, tearing off a piece of his own heart and placing it in All Might's mouth, urging him to swallow. Aizawa gasped in amazement as All Might's body began to regenerate, his hand twitching as life returned to him. All Might sat up, bewildered, and looked at Izuku, who was covered in blood. Izuku embraced All Might, expressing his love for him, trying to hold back his emotions. Aizawa smiled at the heartfelt moment as All Might, still in shock, returned the sentiment. After a few moments, Izuku rose to his feet, surrounded by his classmates as the sun began to rise. He reached his hand toward the sky, closing his eyes and declaring that they were immortal. With a determined smile, he brought down several stars, creating small craters in the ground. He proclaimed that he could resurrect but could not die, smiling as he helped himself up. The stars began to move, and as he whispered, "Resurrection," All Might stood beside him. One by one, the villains, heroes, and family members Izuku had defeated rose from the craters, including someone very dear to All Might, who stood at the back of the group. She had beautiful long black hair and stunning gray eyes, bringing a gasp of recognition from All Might and tears to Tamura's eyes as he realized who it was. As All Might approached his teacher, Bakugo grabbed Izuku's shoulder, pulling him back in a moment of frustration. Izuku, despite having the ability to dodge, chose not to. Bakugo expressed his feelings with intensity, insisting that Izuku should not die, threatening him in a way that only a true friend could. Izuku, recovering from Bakugo's outburst, turned back and smiled, understanding the depth of Bakugo's emotions. He apologized, scratching his cheek, as a few days had passed since AFO's demise. Aizawa, appearing suddenly, struck All Might on the head as he approached the classroom door. All Might, puzzled, questioned the action. Aizawa, partially hiding his face in his scarf, expressed his annoyance at being called Dadzawa, a reference to a previous conversation. All Might chuckled, apologizing as he opened the door to reveal his students. Izuku sat happily in his chair, talking to himself, as All Might and Aizawa began the day's lessons. All Might had been learning how to be a proper teacher from his mentor, Nana, who guided him every step of the way. He no longer experienced physical pain, having gained immortality through a unique bond with Izuku. This new existence allowed him to return to his muscular form whenever he wished, embodying the symbol of peace. However, the weight of immortality loomed over him. The thought of witnessing the world in both its darkest and brightest moments for thousands of years without rest troubled him. He longed to see Izuku step into his role with his guidance before finding peace, but the idea of living forever was daunting. Inko, after her resurrection, struggled to connect with Izuku as she once did. The reality that Izuku had taken her life without hesitation left her deeply wounded. While she continued to support him, she needed time to process her feelings. All Might made it a point to visit her nightly, ensuring she was coping well. Izuku had restored everyone's quirks, retaining his own in the process. He managed to control his abilities with guidance from the original owners of those quirks. With Todoroki's support, Izuku accepted being called by his name again, while Endeavor began to learn how to be a better father to both Todoroki and Dabi. Izuku communicated with his other half through his mind, unsure of how to handle this duality. Occasionally he allowed his darker side to take control, but it rarely acted out, leading to a normal experience for Izuku. They found comfort in their conversations, which sufficed for both. Bakugo received lessons from Izuku every afternoon, focusing on becoming a better person while Izuku helped him prepare for his pro-hero aspirations. Initially, Bakugo hesitated to reclaim his quirk, likely feeling guilt over his past actions toward Izuku when he was quirkless. Eventually, Izuku insisted that Bakugo take back his quirk, which led to a chase around the academy as Bakugo expressed his frustration. Tamura began to heal emotionally by spending more time with Nana, who provided him with support. AFO had left a significant mark on his psyche, making him view life as a constant battle. Every Friday, All Might and Izuku sparred on the beach, where All Might taught Izuku various fighting strategies. Aizawa and Shoto often joined them for additional practice. Izuku's physical abilities shone during the sports festival in his second year at UA, leading him to victory and elevating his popularity to match that of All Might, making All Might feel like a proud father. Izuku felt a wave of uncertainty wash over him as he asked All Might if everyone hated him. The question caught All Might off guard, causing him to choke on his drink. Izuku's expression was serious, and he looked down at his scarred hands, reflecting on his past actions. He confessed that he had taken lives and then brought back classmates, family members, and strangers. The weight of his actions made him feel unworthy of forgiveness. Allmight, concerned, asked if Izuku regretted reviving them. Izuku's immediate response was a firm no, which brought a smile to Allmight's face. Allmight reminded him that his intentions had not been to harm anyone, and everyone understood that the real Izuku was not defined by those actions. Izuku's voice trembled as he expressed his fears that others would not see it that way. Allmight reassured him that while it might take time for everyone to adjust, they recognized that Izuku bore the greater burden of pain. Then, Izuku turned the conversation towards Allmight, revealing his belief that his admiration for him was based on a falsehood. Allmight was taken aback, unsure of how to respond. Izuku insisted that the truth was undeniable. He felt like a mere imitation of a hero, a fake successor. Despite his doubts, he couldn't help but admire Allmight for everything he represented. Allmight embraced Izuku, who was struggling to hold back tears. Allmight's voice trembled as he told Izuku that he didn't need to save him again, feeling that he deserved the pain he carried. Their conversation was heavy, each word striking deep within them. Izuku, filled with dread, asked if All for One had ultimately won. Allmight took a deep breath, the weight of the truth heavy on his heart. He confirmed Izuku's fears, acknowledging the harsh reality that loomed over them both. In that moment, Izuku felt like a fake child, a fake hero, a fake successor, and a fake son. The truth was undeniable. Book 2 title, Return of the Dead. Chapter 1 begins with a deep exploration of Izuku's two contrasting personalities, the hero and the darker side that harbors a killer instinct. As the story unfolds, the battle between these two aspects intensifies, leading to overwhelming lies and the revelation of hidden truths. The emotional stakes are high, and readers can expect a journey filled with tension and introspection. As the narrative progresses, Izuku grapples with the complexities of his identity, facing challenges that test his resolve and push him to confront the darker urges within. The struggle is not just external but deeply internal, as he seeks to reconcile the hero he aspires to be with the shadows that threaten to consume him. This chapter sets the stage for a gripping continuation of Izuku's journey, promising moments that will resonate with readers and evoke a range of emotions. The path ahead is fraught with danger and discovery, and it invites readers to delve deeper into the psyche of a young hero caught between light and darkness.